right, good morning. I hope that you're all doing well. It's nice to see many of your faces. I haven't seen you in a long time. I'm going to be introducing IB history here at RAS. It's also group 3. Um, History, of course, is about studying the past, but the goal of IB history is number one, is that there's not one story of history, that there's many stories or multiple perspectives. And so that's the number one focus of the class, is that you look at events in the past from multiple perspectives. Number two, then, you become a historian and you actually start to focus on it as a discipline. When we say discipline, it's what do historians do? And you become very specific to the language so that your actions are reflecting that kind of work. And then, of course, that involves some historical skills. And the primary focus in history is looking at sources. Like, what evidence do we have of the past and what does it show us? So history in IB is a critical exploration. And we don't just look at why does it happen, we also look at who's responsible. What are the implications of the past? And so there are two differences. There's SL and HL. And so for SL history, there's a prescribed subject. Everyone looks at Move to Global War, and we'll go through that. And then they have two topics that they investigate in 20th century. So what does that mean? It has to take place in the 20th century. Then thirdly, there is a historical investigation, which is the internal assessment. The internal assessment is the independent work of a student that's produced on one topic of their choice. Okay, for history, according to the IB, it has to at least be 10 years in the past, so there's enough work or sources available. And so, for example, starting history next year, you would not be able to do anything before 2011. So there hasn't been enough time for people to have access to materials or to really understand an event. So it's really about looking in the past. Secondly, HL differs by adding one additional focus, and those are called the regional options. And so this is where history really becomes the focus of who the students who take history. And so a regional option is that you focus on a particular part of the world. So IB organizes the world as like Africa and Middle East, Americas, including North, South, as well as Caribbean islands. And then in addition, there is Asia and Oceania in the Pacific. And then there is also Europe. So the difference between SL and HL is that you do an in-depth investigation of a topic in one of these regions, and it usually includes 50 years. So you kind of go really in-depth on a topic that's of interest to you. So Move to Global War includes two case studies, and this is at the end of World War I up to World War II. And the first case study is Japan, and the second case study is comparative of Italy and Germany. And all of this is about the growth of fascism and how do leaders and ideologies cause war. And so it's an exploration of that. In addition to that is the topics. And so the topics that we do here at RES are authoritarian states. So what causes a country to have an authoritarian leader? Is it economic? Is it war? At what factors included? And so we choose from a range of different leaders. A second topic is causes and effects of war. It's the study of war. Why do wars happen? How does it affect people? What are the economic and social implications of a war? And then thirdly is the Cold War. And the Cold War is essentially at the end of World War II all the way to the end of the Soviet Union. And history is taught in case studies. So you focus on a particular leader or a particular war. So currently right now in grade 12, we're doing the Algerian War. In grade 11, we're focusing in one class on the rise of authoritarian leaders. So it depends on the students as to what is their focus or what are they most interested in. Do we want to look at individuals and their power, or do we want to look at other factors that contribute to war, and how does that shape us? HL regions traditionally here at RES have been in two areas, Africa and the Middle East, or in Europe. And so right now in year 2, I have Africa and the Middle East, and we're primarily focusing on the Abbasid dynasty, which is like one of the first Islamic dynasties. In addition, we've studied the Ottoman Empire. In 11th grade right now, we're focusing on the impact of the First World War on the Middle East, like the creation of modern day states there after the war. And also, we're focusing on Europe. And one class is focusing on Imperial Russia, the rule of czars, and then going into the Russian Revolution. So those are a couple examples. But what happens in history is that we build the syllabus based on like what students are interested in. And so there is one set topic, of course, move to global war. But then there is adjustments that occur to either one. Any questions about that? That's a lot of information. All right, so history is about investigation, and it asks us to think about you as a historian, what do historians do? So in the class, often the tactics or things that we're doing in class are what historians do. We think about, like TOK, how is knowledge gained of the past? What evidence do we have? Is that evidence accurate? How can we use that to compare? We look particularly at trying to understand the past in a way that is objective. Or is that even possible as humans? Can we be unbiased? Can we approach something without our own experience to understand the implications? So these are some of the things that we do to kind of consider what was in the past and how does that range. Any questions about that? You've had a lot of presentations, yeah?
Yeah.
So with that, in history, it's just another way to look at it in the past, but it is within a particular focus. And so when you think about your choices, you want to think about what are some of your strengths and also your interests, right? You're going to be spending your time for 2 years on your courses, so that you want to think about what to focus on and how to select your courses based on that. Yeah? Any questions? How many presentations have you had so far?
4.
Great, 4. And then you have more tomorrow.
Just a bit.
And the next day.
Kinda. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll be thinking about what are some things that that help you to make your choices. You can always think about what do you want to be doing in the future, to also consider as well what's going to help you determine the classes that you'll choose. Yeah? It's a process that you really want to think about yourself. You've already spent 2 years in high school. You've had a lot of experience with different teachers, different subjects, and you want to think about in what ways that you can build on that for your last 2 years. Because it's different than like just 10th grade. You're thinking about for 2 years now in terms of that focus. So there was a few more questions. I'm going to go past this directly. But one of the things that history is about, in contrast to other Group 3 includes economics and global politics. I think you saw global politics today.
Yeah.
And you'll see economics in the upcoming. These are the ones that we offer here at RAS. And so we want to think about what that means. And so interpretations sometimes reflect some of the ideas of economics because we look at economic historians. How do those factors contribute to causation? But also we look at our own interpretation. And so that's the goal of history and investigating in order to understand that. So I'm going to stop talking. If you have questions or if you have concerns. Every course has an IA, like an internal assessment.
Yeah.
So that's where you go in depth for that investigation, but you're basically doing practical work.
So besides like the IB requirements where you do an IA and the exams,
Yep.
there's the extra courses, but besides that, like the classes that are not assessed by the IB, like the stuff you do in class, that will be kind of more towards like what we're used to, right? Like it's kind of, we have work, obviously it'll be harder, but we have work and we just do that. It's not really IB related.
Well, you have an end goal at the end of 2 years to do an exam. So you have to be prepared for that exam. So we have two things we have to do, is that you have a specific amount of information that you need to understand, or methods and approaches, but there's all kinds of different ways to do it. So yes, you can have a debate, you can have a speech, you can have a simulation, you can have a role play, you can do research. All of those things are different ways so that you have understanding and relationship with the information to then make your own interpretations or judgments.
And we'll get like grades as normal throughout the school year.
Yes. So we use the feedback of the IB like mark schemes so that you understand what you should be doing according to IB. But that also is different. So for example, in your 11th grade year, you're not penalized because you haven't had that information. You have to understand, like, wait, what does it look like to examine this topic? Or what does that look like to write like this, so that you understand how to do that. And then also to kind of make sure that you're on track to what you want to be able to achieve. So our goal, especially in group 3, you don't have to have prior knowledge. You don't have to be an economist. You don't have to be a historian. You don't have to be a politician in terms of approaching the methodologies. You have to be willing, though, to think differently and then to try how this is in terms of the particular subject. Does that help?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So the in-class grades go on our transcript, and then the other things are grades.
So similar to this year, you have 2 grades, right? You have a semester 1 and a semester 2, and that ends in 1 year grade. So in IB, in addition to that, your end of year is the most important. Why? It's a good indicator where you have been for the whole year. But you do have checks so that it's not just about, at the end, like, oh, am I being successful? But it's constantly shifting so that you understand how to be successful. In IB, we do a predicted grade. And so a prediction is like, are you on track to that end goal that you want, right? And if not, like, what else do you need to do? Because you have to learn that subject and that discipline and knowledge, and then also how to be thinking that way. Does that help?
Yeah.
So all of the assessments, yes, are in RAS and like recorded in regards to that, but really they're all practice. At the end, what counts is the diploma, and the diploma rests on you gaining specific scores. And I think Ms. Gerard has already talked to you about this.
Yes.
In that you're thinking particularly about levels or scores, right? So you have to have a 4 in an HL course in order for that to pass. You have to have a specific amount of points. And
so all the grades that we get, like normal class grades, are kind of a lead up and a practice to like the IB class.
yeah, so you get feedback on that, but the grades are on the RES,
Okay.
like the same scales, right? So like you have your knowledge and understanding, investigation, and communication. That's how grades are communicated here at RES.
Okay, so like when you send your transcript
Uh-huh.
to like a college, for
Yes.
example, for your application, does that transcript have the grades that like just like the ones that weren't assessed by IB, or does it have the ones that were?
It has your end of semester grades and then your IB. The difference is if you apply to an American college is that you check, I took an IB course. That is a college preparatory course, and they have a different weighting in terms of their role on yours. So if you're thinking about, are you still kind of deciding what pathway to take? Okay, there's the full diploma, but you can also just take an exam in one course, and that's called the certificate option. And so that's another way to think about it. Yeah? Any last questions? You've had a lot of talking about, but you're also probably thinking about what's of interest to you. And also now you're planning, because you're basically planning for your exit of your high school experience. It goes by so fast you won't even realize it. So it's nice to see all of you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to, that's not mine, happy to help you. Okay?
Miss?
Yeah. What is that?
Okay, use it. Yeah. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do.